Hey there, and welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going deep into foundationalism.
Hmm.
It's a theory all about,
Yeah,
you know, how we justify our beliefs, like what counts as knowledge.
that's right. It's about finding that solid ground for our beliefs.
Right.
Yeah,
Those bedrock beliefs that we don't need to prove.
exactly. Like if every single belief needed another belief to back it up, we'd be in this endless chain of justifications, never really getting to a solid starting point.
You sent over some excerpts from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on this.
Oh, yeah.
It's dense stuff,
It can be a bit heady.
but I think we can break it down together. So
Yeah.
what is this regress problem that foundationalism is trying to solve?
Well, it's this idea that if every belief needs another belief to justify it, we'd never get anywhere. Like, imagine trying to explain why you believe the Earth is round.
Okay.
You could give your reasons,
Yeah.
but then someone could ask, well, what's the justification for those reasons? And so on forever.
Yeah, it'd be like trying to climb a ladder that never ends.
Exactly.
So foundationalism comes in and says,
Yeah,
hold on, there are some beliefs that are just self-evident.
right.
They just are.
Mm,
We don't need to prove them.
exactly. Foundationalists argue that there are certain beliefs that are just basic foundational.
Okay.
They form the foundation for all our other beliefs.
So these,
And these foundational beliefs are considered justified in themselves without needing to rely on other beliefs for support.
okay, I'm starting to see how this works.
Mm.
But what kinds of beliefs are we talking about here? Like, give me an example.
Sure. Let's consider the belief, I feel pain.
Hmm.
This seems like a pretty basic belief, right?
Yeah,
You don't need further proof to justify it. You just experience it directly.
that makes sense. But does that mean we're just taking everything our senses tell us at face value?
Well,
Like, what if our perceptions are wrong?
that's a great point. And it leads to some serious challenges for foundationalism.
The excerpts you sent mentioned another theory, coherentism,
Yeah,
as an alternative.
right.
How does that approach justification?
Well, coherentism suggests that beliefs are justified by how well they fit together. Think of it like a jigsaw puzzle.
Okay.
Each piece gets its justification from how it interlocks with the others.
So instead of a solid foundation, it's more like a web of interconnected beliefs all kind of supporting each other.
Precisely. But then the question becomes, is that interconnectedness enough to guarantee that those beliefs are actually true or justified?
I see the tension there.
Yeah.
But let's stick with foundationalism for now. You mentioned Descartes
Yeah.
as a key figure in classical foundationalism.
Yes.
And wasn't he all about finding those absolutely certain, unshakable truths?
Absolutely. Descartes was obsessed with finding beliefs that were completely immune to doubt. He wanted to build his entire system of knowledge on this foundation of absolutely certain, indubitable truths.
And it seems like a pretty tall order.
Yeah.
Can we really be absolutely certain about anything?
That's a major issue. And the Stanford Encyclopedia article highlights a couple of big problems with this classical approach.
Okay, let's hear them. I'm ready to get to the bottom of this.
Okay, well, one problem is that classical foundationalism might struggle to explain necessary truths, like mathematical principles, for example,
great.
2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah.
If believing it makes it true, doesn't that seem like a foundation that's too easily gained?
Yeah, it does feel a bit like cheating.
Right.
It shouldn't be that simple,
Yeah.
right? So what's the other issue?
The other problem is that there might be too few foundations.
Hmm.
Like, how do we go from I exist to knowing about the world around us, the complexities of history, the vastness of the universe, if we're limited to just a tiny handful of these absolutely certain beliefs as our starting point?
Yeah, we need,
It's
it's
just-
like we need more to work with.
More to work with. Yeah. A solid foundation, but not so narrow that we can't explain anything beyond our immediate experience.
Right.
Okay, I see the dilemma here.
And that brings us to another fascinating idea called acquaintance theory.
Acquaintance theory. Okay.
This theory suggests that our foundation isn't just what we believe.
But our direct experience of things.
Okay.
The Stanford Encyclopedia uses the example of knowing you're in pain because you feel it directly.
Yeah.
It's kind of a firsthand access that no one else can have.
So it's about how we connect with the world through our senses and our perceptions.
In a way, yes. But of course, there are wrinkles here, too.
Okay, like what?
Well, does simply having this direct acquaintance automatically equal a justified belief? What if we misinterpret those experiences?
Oh yeah, like mistaking a shadow for a monster. Or
Exactly.
seeing a mirage in the desert.
Right. Our senses can be tricky.
Yeah, they can.
And those sorts of questions lead us to more refined versions of foundationalism that try to address these
So we've
limitations.
talked about classical foundationalism, with its
Hmm.
focus on those infallible beliefs, but as you pointed out,
Right.
that's some pretty big hurdles to clear.
It does. And that's where these updated versions of foundationalism come into play.
Right?
They try to address some of those limitations while still holding on to that basic idea of foundational beliefs.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's dive into these modern takes on foundationalism.
All right. One prominent idea is what's called phenomenal conservatism.
Phenomenal conservatism.
Yeah. This view suggests that if something seems to be true to you, then you have at least some initial justification for believing it.
Hmm. So it seems to me like there's a cup of coffee on my desk, but I have at least some reason to think there really is a cup of coffee there,
Exactly.
even if I haven't, gotten up to touch it or anything.
Right. It's like our initial perceptions have this kind of innocent until proven guilty status. They provide a starting point for knowledge.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about those cases where our senses do deceive us?
Yeah.
Like if I see a mirage in the desert or
Right.
mistake a shadow for something else.
That's where the defeasibility aspect of phenomenal conservatism comes in.
Okay.
It acknowledges that our initial justifications can be defeated or overridden if there's evidence to the contrary.
So if I reach for that cup of coffee and my hand goes right through it,
Right.
then I'd have to revise my initial belief.
Exactly. Phenomenal conservatism allows for the possibility of error and recognizes that we need to be open to revising our beliefs in light of new evidence.
That seems pretty reasonable. I can get on board with that. So what other modern foundationalist views are out there?
Well, another view is called dogmatism.
Dogmatism.
Yeah. Now, before you jump to conclusions, this
Yeah.
isn't about being stubborn or closed-minded.
Okay, I'm listening.
Uh.
How does dogmatism fit into all of this?
Well, in this context, dogmatism is about placing a high degree of trust in our initial perceptions or seemings. It suggests that these seemings have a kind of default level of justification.
So if it seems to me that the sky is blue, then I have some justification for believing that the sky is blue.
Exactly. But just like phenomenal conservatism,
Yeah.
dogmatism recognizes that this initial justification can be defeated if we encounter contradictory evidence.
So both phenomenal conservatism and dogmatism put a lot of emphasis on how things appear to us,
Right.
but they also acknowledge that our perceptions aren't always perfect.
Yes. They try to find that balance between trusting our experiences and recognizing that those experiences can sometimes be misleading.
It seems like we keep coming back to this tension
Yeah.
between trusting our senses and knowing that they can sometimes fool us.
It's a fundamental issue in epistemology.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile the fact that our knowledge of the world comes through our senses, but those senses can be fallible?
It's a real head scratcher.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
Well, up until now, we've been talking about internalist views of foundationalism,
Yeah.
which focus on the mental states of the believer.
Right.
But there's another major approach that flips the script. It's called externalist foundationalism.
Externalist foundationalism.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
All right. Externalist foundationalism shifts the focus away from what's going on inside our minds
Okay.
to how our beliefs are formed. It's not about our internal experiences,
Right.
but about the processes that lead to those beliefs.
It's not about what I'm thinking or feeling, but about how those thoughts and feelings came to be. Exactly. One of the key players in externalist foundationalism is reliabilism.
Reliabilism. I'm guessing it has something to do with being reliable.
Sharp as always.
Yeah.
Yes. Reliabilism says that a belief is justified if it's produced by a reliable process. Think of it like a machine
Okay.
that consistently produces accurate results.
So if my belief that the Earth revolves around the sun
Right.
is formed by a reliable process of scientific inquiry, then it's justified.
Exactly. The process matters more than my subjective experience of believing it.
But what if someone has a knack for predicting things? Like, let's say the outcome of a sporting event, but they can't explain how they do it.
Yeah.
Are their beliefs justified even though the process is mysterious?
That's a great question, and it points to one of the challenges to reliabilism.
Okay.
The Stanford Encyclopedia calls it the Norman problem.
Norman problem.
Yeah, named after a hypothetical person
Okay.
with reliable but unexplained predictive abilities.
So reliabilism struggles to explain those cases where we have reliable beliefs, but we don't fully understand the processes behind them.
It's a point of debate among philosophers.
Uh.
Some reliabilists argue that even if we don't understand the process, if it consistently produces true beliefs, then those beliefs are justified.
It seems like there's still a lot to figure out when it comes to reliabilism.
Absolutely. And there's another challenge that the Stanford Encyclopedia brings up called the evil demon problem.
Evil demon. Now we're getting into spooky territory.
It's a thought experiment that asks, what if someone's beliefs are consistently wrong,
Okay.
but they feel completely real to them?
Hmm.
Imagine being tricked by a powerful demon into believing things that are false.
Well, okay. That's a bit unsettling. But I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
If those beliefs are formed by an unreliable process, are they still justified?
That's the crux of the problem.
Yeah.
It forces reliabilists to consider whether external factors alone
Right.
are sufficient for justification, or if there needs to be some internal element as well.
So we've got these internalist views, like phenomenal conservatism and dogmatism, focused on how things seem to us.
Right.
And we've got this externalist view, reliabilism, focused on the reliability of the processes that form our belief.
Exactly. And both approaches have their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
They highlight different aspects of what might make a belief justified.
It's like foundationalism itself is branching out into all these different directions.
Yeah.
With each view offering its own perspective on how we ground our knowledge.
And that's what makes it such a fascinating area of philosophy. It forces us to grapple with these really fundamental questions about how we know what we know.
So we've explored all these different perspectives on foundationalism.
Yeah.
You know, internalist, externalist.
Right.
Each with its own take on how we justify our beliefs.
Right.
But it seems like every time we get close to an answer, another question pops up.
That's the nature of philosophy, isn't it? We just keep digging deeper, uncovering new layers of complexity. And one of the recurring criticisms that comes up for both internalist and externalist foundationalism is what's called the problem of easy knowledge.
The problem of easy knowledge.
Yeah.
Does that mean, like, knowing things is actually simple? And we've been overthinking it this whole time?
And I wish it were that easy.
No.
The problem of easy knowledge suggests that some foundationalist views might make it too easy to justify certain beliefs.
Okay.
Even beliefs that should be difficult to justify.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Give me an example.
All right. Let's go back to phenomenal conservatism for a moment.
Okay.
Remember, it says that if something seems true to you, then you have some initial justification for believing it.
Right.
But what happens when we start drawing inferences from those initial beliefs?
Okay, so, like, if it seems red to me, then it's not green.
Exactly. Phenomenal conservatism might imply that we can gain justification for that conclusion simply based on the initial seeming of redness, even without any independent reasons to trust our color perception.
Yeah, it does seem a bit too quick.
Right.
Like we're skipping a step or two.
Exactly. It seems like we're getting knowledge too easily without enough justification.
And does this problem of easy knowledge apply to other foundationalist views too?
It can, yes. It can extend to reliabilism as well.
Okay.
For example, we might use deductive reasoning to arrive at the belief that we're not brains and vats, simply because our senses reliably tell us we have bodies.
Right. But that should be a much harder belief to justify.
Right.
It feels like we need more than just our sensory experiences to rule out that kind of radical skeptical scenario.
Exactly. The problem of easy knowledge highlights this concern that foundationalism might allow us to justify beliefs that should require much stronger evidence.
So what does all of this mean for foundationalism as a whole?
Yeah.
I mean, does the problem of easy knowledge completely undermine it?
It definitely is a significant challenge. It forces foundationalists to grapple with, how much weight to give to those foundational beliefs and what limits there should be on how we gain justification from them.
It seems like we've come full circle in a way. We started with the regress problem.
Right.
That endless chain of justification.
Yeah.
And now we're faced with the problem of easy knowledge, where justification seems to come too easily.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this whole debate about foundationalism so compelling. It really pushes us to think deeply about the nature of knowledge justification and the very foundations of our belief systems.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into foundationalism.
It has.
It's clear that there are no easy answers when it comes to figuring out how we know what we know.
That's for sure.
But for our listeners out there who are now pondering the foundations of their own beliefs, what's the key takeaway from all of this?
Well, perhaps the most important takeaway is to cultivate an awareness of the assumptions and beliefs that underpin our understanding of the world. To question those foundations and to be open to revising them in light of new evidence and arguments.
That's a great note to end on. Always be curious.
Yes.
Keep questioning. Keep exploring the foundations of your own knowledge.
Until next time, keep on learning.